I'm just going to get started again. We're recording now. So just so you guys know, just to introduce the cast of characters here. So Bobby, obviously, you know. So I have Brandon Cruz on here, and you know, I had Rick do golf on here a few weeks ago, and the reason why I'm having Brandon on here is because, as you guys know, especially during quarantine, you know, I was putting out some DFS NASCAR content because honestly, I was very interested in it, and I was doing it myself, and you guys are always asking me, you know, where do I get my DFS? Because obviously I don't know anything about freaking cars, right? So I figured that I would at some point have Brandon come on, because Brandon Cruz is one of those real niche type of guys that does, I presume, just nothing but NASCAR. And I really respect that. I mean, with all these generalists out there between, you know, I mentioned Roto Grinders there, but there are a lot of them that, yeah, they want to give, you know, all the sports to all their people, which is, so I appreciate them giving something better than nothing. But for something like this, I always felt it would be better to listen to someone who just kind of lives and breathes this stuff. So what I want to do is, first I want to introduce him, and then Brandon, talk to me a little bit about your history, because I have your YouTube channel up like right now, and like I can't help but it's actually kind of tilting, because every once in a while I would see a new video come out. Because by the way, I do subscribe. You see, subscribe. I did subscribe to his channel. And when I see a new video come up, I would say, ooh, there's a new truck video coming out. And then I would see there was some freaking iRacing thing that he was doing. What do you do? What the hell is this? Right? So give me your history of NASCAR and driving, and where do you come from?
Well, I've been a lifelong race fan my entire life. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, literally walking distance away from a dirt track. And so every Friday night from when I was not even conceived, pretty much, to growing up throughout my entire childhood and up till the track closed back in 2016, I would be there every Friday night. So I grew up around some of the more well-known racers nowadays, like Stormy Scott in the Lucas Oil Dirt Series. He's a local from Las Cruces. The Jones family, Royal Jones, Bumper Jones, Holly Jones, their family races. Royal Jones and Jimmy Ray are the founders of Mesilla Valley Transportation. So if you ever watched any type of dirt track racing, you always see a red MVT on the side of a lot of cars. That's their company. And so when I got older, I started going around asking people, hey, can you guys kind of show me how you guys got into this? Because, you know, we weren't broke or anything, but I certainly didn't have enough money to go racing. And so I went around kind of what Carl Edwards did back in the day. And he just went around, talked to people in the garage, or in the pits rather. And I found this gentleman named Donovan Uli. He helped me get into racing. He would take me to the track, show me everything that he did. And he was just a one-man job. And so I got to really understand what it was like, you know, going to the racetrack every week as like one guy, having to repair your car or do certain things to the tires. And he introduced me to Jimmy Ray, and I was helping Jimmy Ray out on his race team in his shop for over the course of a summer. And then throughout the next couple of years, I would be at the racetrack every weekend with them. And so I got to see both sides of the racing scene, from someone who didn't have, you know, a ton of money to somebody who had not unlimited funds, but certainly more money than normal racers would have. And so, you know, I got to see that aspect. And then obviously I was a huge poker fan growing up. Obviously you can't play it online, and you know, there's no casinos here in Texas or anything where you can play it. And so as soon as I turned 18, I was like, well, the closest thing I can do to poker is DFS. And my birthday's in May, NASCAR was going on. And so NASCAR is naturally the first sport that I got into. And I immediately hit it off in a sense of, hey, I kind of seem to know where to go with people. I seem to know more information than some of the random public does, or if people are taking the information, say, from like NASCAR Race Hub, that really isn't a good tool to find information from. And I figured that's where a lot of, you know, casual players were getting it. And so over the years, I would play, and then I started uploading to YouTube originally just to almost have an archive of my, you know, NASCAR DFS picks or opinions and whatnot. That's kind of why you still see me uploading iRacing videos here and there during the off season, because this wasn't necessarily, you know, a daily fantasy channel. This is still my own personal channel that I just happened to upload this to. And I've never really pushed the channel. Like I'm never really one of those guys. I'm doing it more now. I've never been one of those guys to, hey guys, like the video, get to, subscribe. I need to get to 1,000 subscribers to get monetized. That was never really my goal. I just put the stuff up there in case anybody liked it. And over the course of the last couple of years, a lot of people seem to like it and listen to it. So that's kind of a quick summary of how I got to where I am right now.
Brandon, let me ask you a question. So it's 2021. It's a new NASCAR season. Tell me about the stuff that you just mentioned. So you mentioned, well, I was able to see things that other people couldn't see. And when I first spoke to Bobby about DFS and considered getting into it, I would ask him, I said, listen, is all the information just kind of like priced into all these things now? In other words, like, is there anything out there that you can get an edge on? Because that's where I would do my stock stuff, is if there's no edge, there's nothing to do. And when you have some sports, like, I'll give you an example, Brandon. So like basketball, you have like 30 different projection models projecting out basketball players, and they're all within like 0.02% of each other. And everybody's staring at the same bit of information with respect to injuries and things like that. And as soon as an injury news comes out, like everybody's just totally all over it. And the way that you have to differentiate yourself in basketball is being just like an elite ownership fader and an elite, lineup construction guru, which you can get an edge there. But tell me, like, between, now I mentioned Stevie on Roto Grinders, whatever, he's like the one name, whatever, but like, what's like the state of content with respect to NASCAR, with respect to like what kind of edge you can give? Like when is there information out there? Is there ways to still differentiate yourself as far as actual nuts and bolts content?
There is. It's certainly different in 2021 and post COVID in 2020. The whole DFS NASCAR industry has really had to shift and pivot to more projections and more looking at old race data than anything. Obviously, before you would look at practice data, you would look at where someone's qualifying, everything. Entering these weekends, you really don't have a whole lot to go off, especially I'll use this weekend for the Clash. Some of the teams are practicing, some of the teams aren't taking this race seriously. We don't know that as even race fans, but as people who are putting money on this, we don't know, we don't have the full story. And so you have to go in more, not like willingly to embrace different things that can happen, but you almost have to project things that you aren't really sure of, especially, in 2021, we have no practice right now. Obviously, we're going to have some practice for some of the races, so you can look towards that. But really, the only thing that I look at is how these drivers are doing and how they're performing in races and what they're showing up to the track. That's really all we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you have all these providers out there, and they're giving projections and things like that. So I'm trying to figure out how to win, right? So when you, let's say you put out a projection on a driver, and let's just say I compared yours to 4 other people's in the industries, are you going to see those projections usually converge? Are you going to see them very, very close? Or are you going to see a degree of variation between them? I mean, I don't even know if you look at other content, you know what I mean? And I'm going to ask you to recommend, people like your friend or whoever it is. But do you find is that there's, again, these are the things I'd like to ask, is how close is all the content to each other, especially with respect to projections?
It seems this year all the content providers and everything tend to centralize on certain plays. And so regardless of what website you're looking at, regardless of who you're looking at, and I'm not saying I'm the best or worse, I'm not saying that, but you'll see similarities between pretty much all content providers, whether it's a truck race, an Xfinity race, or a Cup Series race. Normally, the certain chalk is known throughout the industry. Even if you aren't familiar with projections or ownership projections, if you look at 3 to 4 people, whether it's websites, videos, and whatnot, and you see us as people, saying the same names over and over again, that's usually how you can tell if someone's going to be popular or not. I tend to be very very aggressive with my fades and my projections, in a sense of if I'm entering a bunch of lineups, which I'm going back to this year. I didn't do it last year because I wasn't necessarily sure how I would do without practice data, because I really heavily relied on that. Before that, I'd enter 20, 25, 30 lineups in the most weeks. And I'm going to go back to that this year. But normally what I would do is, instead of making, say those 30, 50, however many lineups I make, and trying to pinpoint every direction a race could go, I normally focus on 2 to 3 situations, whether that's owned or not owned in terms of ownership. And so if that hits, most of my lineups are going to be they're going to score high. And if it doesn't hit, I'm not necessarily going to do well that weekend. And it's not that I'm going all in on like 6 drivers each week, but the way that I would make lineups would, centralize around, how I expect this race to go. Like, for example, this Clash race tonight, I'm expecting certain drivers to go into practice. Whether that's the case or not, that's what I'm building into my projections. And
when you say go into practice, I'm gonna. So now here's one thing, Brandon. Here's one thing when you talk about your videos, you sometimes say, "Well, everybody knows this. Everybody knows this." Don't be so sure. I mean, because I consider myself kind of a sharp guy, and when you say stuff, you say, well, obviously everybody knows this, and even like terms like that, when you say they're going into practice. So this particular race, for example, if I'm reading between the lines, there are some guys that are literally using this just to kind of just run around the track.
Yeah, and to test and see what their car has. And maybe that's a fault of me reading so much into it. I'm like, oh, everybody knows this, or everybody doesn't know that. And I'm not sure I can necessarily change of how I view that. And maybe it's because I just read so much news or look into it. But like, for example, when Brad Keselowski and Matt DiBenedetto were interviewed, last week and a half ago, talking about this Clash race, I don't exactly remember what words they said, but Keselowski was more along the lines of, well, we come to this race in 2 weeks, we don't have practice. If we don't have the car for this night, we're going to use this more as a test session to know what we can get coming back to this race in 2 weeks when we don't have practice. Because these guys are at a luxury of getting 35 laps on this track, whereas the rest of the field in 2 weeks won't have that luxury.
So now here's the fun question. Here's where this is like my world now. So what you just said, that there's, Keselowski said that he might be running around. How much does everybody know that? And how much is that already, you think, built into, number one, the price, and more important, number two, the ownership? Like, for example, like if someone, I'll use an extreme example. If they announced in basketball that Russell Westbrook was going to have, say, an 8 minutes limit, everybody would know it, and he would literally have zero chance to ever cash because just 8 minutes is not possible. But when they say something like, all right, Brad Keselowski is going to use this just for practice, is that mean that he's unplayable, or does that mean he has a kind of a cap on his ceiling? Or does that just mean it's less likely that he can do anything? Like, what does news like that mean with respect to like a driver?
It would probably mean the latter two options that you said, to where he caps his ceiling and caps his potential. I mean, he could show up with, testing with a practice setup and just dominate the race.
Oh, so that's possible.
Yeah, so that's also possible. His team could be like, well, we're going to test this setup, and then it just ends up being the fastest car that we've ever seen. So we don't know that, in a sense, and that's where it comes into practicing. And sense of how many people would know this, like I said, I guess I assume everybody knows this. I can usually project ownership better than how well or how knowledgeable people will be entering the race.
Okay. Yeah. So what's interesting is again, this is, and again, for those who aren't familiar with NASCAR that much, so this is kind of an extreme example, but let me pull up the and I'm doing all this for a reason. Let me pull up the main one, the Daytona event. So yeah, what's interesting about, and part of the reason what's interesting about NASCAR is, as a sport to bet on as far as DFS goes. So you look at this, and you're going to have usually between 35 and 40 betting entities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 40 betting entities, and you have to fill 6 spots. So it's like golf in that you have to fill 6 spots, but it's like other sports, like you only have 40 to choose from. So if you want to try to win a GPP, it's gonna be difficult to win by yourself, right? In a 40, even in a 40 person event, it's just going to be difficult to win by yourself. So you're going to have to, again, this is why I kind of like it, you're going to have to try to get as low owned as you can. So I guess my question is, first question is, how low owned do you have to get? I know it's slate dependent and all that stuff, but like if we're in basketball, and Bobby and I talk about this a lot, you could play like 5 or 6 chalk basketball players in your lineup and just 2 or 3 pivots that'll just kind of do it. But like in NASCAR, do you have to go like, you know, that off the board? I mean, how many pivots do you really need to make, or how low owned does your lineup have to be for you to have a chance to win these things?
Yeah, it's a different entity compared to, like, say, NBA. Say if you have a center that's just going to be chalk, and you can't avoid him. Everybody's playing him, and then you pivot other places. In terms of how likely it is to win a GPP like by itself and not tie, it happens a lot in NASCAR, and I imagine it's going to happen more this year with how they changed the fast laps. Having 0.45 is, I think that's going to be huge in terms of separating lineups by 0.05 points.
Okay,
just because
interesting.
because you used to have fast laps be 0.25, or excuse me, you had laps led be 0.25 and fast laps at 0.5. And so if you got 2 laps led, it would be equivalent to, you know, a fast lap. Or if you pass certain positions, it would all be equivalent in terms of 0.25, 0.5. Now with the 0.45, which I think that's why DraftKings did it, it should make a lot more single winners. With the big contest, I've never won the big contest by myself. I had the optimal lineup at Auto Club last year, and that split, you know, I don't remember what the prize pool was, but I think I walked away with like 2,200 from that. So it was split between, you know, 50, 60 lineups or whatever. I've won smaller contests by itself, but I've never taken on the big one by myself. And I guess speedways are different. I mean, NASCAR is so volatile in terms of the tracks that you use. I mean, a plate track is going to be completely different compared to the road courses or other races. If you're looking at, like, say, this week at Daytona, the chance that a lot of people have a lineup on their own is very high, with how many people can wreck, how easy it would be for drivers to wreck. In terms of, you know, say like a Charlotte or a 1.5 mile, typically the chalk is known to everybody in terms of if somebody's just mispriced or starting in the back, or if someone should have a great car and he should lead a vast majority of the laps, everybody focuses on those guys. And so it tends to be harder to escape the chalk on regular races, just oval races. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, are you going to be putting out ownership projections? And if not, what do you recommend is a good source for ownership projections?
So I don't have a source for ownership projections. I don't pay a package like to any of the big sites. I don't think that I don't want to get in too much trouble here, but I think those are a bit out of my
this is where trouble survives.
Yeah, you know, I don't think a lot of those packages are worth what they are, and so I'm certainly not paying for them. I was going to say, the way that I get my ownership is I just kind of guess. Like, I listen to a lot of people, and I don't necessarily make a chart of, oh, this guy's going to be 62% owned, this guy's going to be 27, but I can make a good rough estimate of where someone's going to be.
So let me ask you this. So you mentioned you used a cheap center as an example in the NBA. So what would you regard, and I'm going to speak out of turn here, like what I was going to ask is, what would you regard as the chalk that's unfadeable versus the chalk that's fadeable? Like, for example, like, I'll just to throw myself out there. So like it seemed like every week in I think it was the Infinity Series, or it was the Truck Series, they had now the name escapes me, but the guy with the long name was always he was always put in the 36th spot.
Oh, Parker Kligerman.
Yeah. Oh, well, not even Klingerman was the other one, the guy who always won. With a big long name, and I forget who he is. He always seemed to win. Maybe he was player. I don't know. No, it was not Almirola. It was something.
AJ Allmendinger.
Allmendinger, right?
Yeah. Okay,
so he would always be like 35th. He would always be 12K, and he would just always, you know, finish in the top 3. You know what I mean? So so guys like, so is the guys with the really good place differential the tough chalk to fade, or is it, say, like, I'll throw a name on it, like a Cindric or a Harvick on the pole or something like that? Who are the chalk that's the unfadeable versus the fadeable?
It depends on the team, and I think that's where a NASCAR package really comes into play. It's not necessarily that we give you projections. We give you ideas. It's just that we do all the hard work. So,
Okay.
so a lot of you guys don't have to answer that question. Like AJ Allmendinger last year, he had probably the second best team and probably the fourth or fifth best car in the races that he was in. And so that's kind of an anomaly that I don't see happening this year.
Okay.
But in case like if someone's ignorant to NASCAR or they don't understand the teams or whatnot, you have to search up like, hey, who is this guy? Why is he so expensive? What team is he running for? Why is he 12,000 when someone like Timmy Hill is, 5,600 starting one position behind? And if you don't know what car he's in, you might play Timmy Hill over AJ Allmendinger. And sorry, I guess you didn't know that AJ had one of the best cars and Timmy Hill had one of the most underfunded cars in the series.
So you mentioned the term underfunded. Now again, I'm just going to get to these questions that I had. Whether if you lead me to them, that's even better. So you mentioned underfunded. One of the things that you talk about a lot in your videos, and I'm sure everybody does too. I don't know, but it was always interesting to me. Is I just so you know, I play everything. I play the Cup, I play the Infinity, and the trucks. I actually like the other ones better. I like the Infinity and the trucks better.
I do too. But
I think they're great.
Yeah.
And one of the things you always talk about in the Infinity and the truck series is the concept of sponsorship. Like in other words, like which cars are sponsored versus which cars are not. And sometimes you even mentioned that you won't even know until like the day of or the day before whether that sponsorship. So again, it's something you just kind of gloss over. And again, you're like, well, everybody knows this stuff. Like, well, I'm smart and I'm playing for money. I have no idea I can guess what you're talking about. So is it the case then that there's when you say a car is underfunded or is, now I'm going to be really stupid, or non-sponsored, does that mean that unless you get people to put extra money into your car, like you have like less tires or something like that, or just like weaker equipment? I mean, how does that work?
So that's exactly the case. And this might be a little long-winded answer, but I'm going to give from, like I said, my experience of, excuse me, of working with an individual who didn't have a whole lot of money. He was retired. He was just working to fund his race team or fund his race car. And so our tire cost, and this is at the local level, each tire would be, $130 in dirt track racing. And typically those are good for one night. Typically if you're running hard, they're good for one night. We would run those same tires for almost 2 months at a time. And so, because we couldn't afford to keep, buying tires and whatnot. And so that would automatically put us at a disadvantage. And so if you blow that up in terms of tires, in terms of how hard you're pushing your motor, some guys can afford to rebuild a motor every 2-3 months at the local level. Some guys can't even afford to do that every 2 years.
Really?
And so, yeah. And it's not even rebuilding motors. Say if you blow a bell housing or a transmission or something in a race where some people can afford to just buy a new one, that might end someone's race season, in February, and they plan to race all the way to November. And so that's at the local level. When you look at NASCAR, it's the same thing, but those tires in NASCAR, they're like 1,800, 2,000 each. And you see how many tires these teams go through in a race by themselves. Some of the underfunded teams, I'll use MBM Motorsports as an example, because Carl Long was being very upfront about his tire cost in December in a Facebook post. He was saying that we need, like $300,000 for just tires alone for a season. Because they would just let me back up here. Morgan Shepherd is an example of someone who has to start and park races because of his tires. So he can't afford, $2,000 each on a set of tires.
So start and park, that's another term you use. Start and park. That's when they feel as though they don't have enough. They literally don't have enough equipment to get through the race. So they just start. Well, why do they do that? Do they get like a paycheck for just starting or something?
Yeah, and this is where it goes into more detail of NASCAR trying to hide this. If you go on racingreference.com, you can actually see old payouts. I think it's up to 2015, 2016 of positions. If you actually want to do it right now, I'll show you an example. Sure. If you go to racingreference.com.
Racing reference.
Yeah, if you search that, it should pop up. You might have to Google racing reference. By itself. Yeah, I think it has a hyphen, but I don't remember exactly. I promise I'm not sending you to. Yeah, so it's that one. So let's go to, if you click Xfinity Series, I don't know why I'm pointing it.
Right here?
Yeah, if you click that, and then let's scroll down to a year that I know it has payouts. Click 2013 on the left side under year. And then just click a random race under the number tab right next to the date on the left side. It doesn't matter which one you click. We'll use that Talladega one, for example. And so if you look, there's a money tab there, and NASCAR doesn't release this anymore.
Oh,
And so you can see what the teams actually got as a finishing position. I don't remember what the entry fee is right now because NASCAR doesn't release that to the public. I don't even remember what it used to be. It used to be, I think, a couple grand to start a race, maybe a bit more. And so all the outside sponsorships like Camping World, Sunoco, all the contingency sponsors that you see on the cars right behind the front wheels would pay for this money. And this is also the track money. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the car that finished dead last got $14,000 in this particular race. And this, I guarantee you, Jeff Green's start and park this race because he, in that red writing, you see vibration. That means he stopped racing because of the vibration and he couldn't continue in the race. And so he got paid $14,000 to start this race, and then just finished dead last. And so at certain races, it's actually more profitable for some teams to run less amount of laps and just stop or just end the, like, retire in the middle of the race versus competing, worrying about, like I said, blowing an engine, hitting the wall, having to repair your car, whereas you can just start and get, 14,000. And that's a plate track. If you go to other races, it's much smaller. It's almost like $8,000, $6,000 to finish last.
That's that's why I was wondering, why they would even show up at all. And I guess that's because, you have paychecks better than nothing, right?
Mhm.
So, but yet, like you said, the underfunded teams, they don't have enough, to run the whole race, and they may as well save it for another
Mhm.
paycheck or something like that. It's funny, people are betting money on these guys that are just these. I guess I fail to appreciate how much it costs to
Mhm.
to run in this stuff. Like, we're used to betting on the NBA, where people, have like $1 billion shoe deals, right? But
Mhm.
they were betting on these on race cars that might not even have enough freaking, might not have an air pump to put their
Uh-huh.
to pump their
Exactly.
tires, to be exaggerating, whatever. So that's that is really interesting. So let me move on to a different question regarding the DFS and NASCAR in general. One thing I just kind of touched on was ownership, right? And I feel that's really important. You mentioned teams, and that kind of led me to my next question. Another thing that separates one DFS construction from another with respect to basketball, football, or whatever, or baseball, is the impact of correlation on the rest of your lineup, right? So in baseball, you want to take you want to stack guys from the same offense because one relies on the other. Football, you want the quarterback because he's going to throw it to the wide receiver to be in the same lineup. Golf, not so much. You could make the argument that you want to stack guys that have the same tee time because of wind, whatever. That's very fishy. Basketball, people are debating. So when I first looked at NASCAR, I was wondering what type of correlation might exist. And this was going through my own head. My own head is, okay, one would think, first of all, that the teams would be something to do because they would kind of help each other. And then I didn't know if that was accurate because only one guy from a team can win. I don't know. And then the other thing I was thinking of is, do kind of like positions correlate? In other words, like if you are going to be at a track that, and I did a little content like this, like a big bowl track where it's going to be very difficult to pass anybody, right? That would be a good correlation to have more guys near the front, right? Or as we'll get to later, if you have a track where, you start at the front or you're dead last, doesn't matter, like maybe this weekend, maybe does the ability of one guy in the back to do better impact the other guy? Like, so with respect, I don't know, it'd be too confusing, but with respect to correlation, is there anything that you would think is important with respect to NASCAR, whether it be teammates working together or, again, different parts of the pack kind of working together?
So to answer that question, we have to look at why correlation works in other sports and why it doesn't work here. So, for example, for the NFL, I'll use the Super Bowl for example. Tom Brady throws 2 touchdowns to Gronkowski. Brady gets the yardage from that, 4 points from that. Gronk gets the yardage and the 6 points from those touchdowns. And so, theoretically, they could score as many times as they wanted to in that hour period of the football game. NBA, I don't see it as much as some people do, because let's look at the Lakers, Anthony Davis and LeBron. There's a chance that they can assist each other in points, but typically if one guy is scoring in that, the other one is not scoring. In NASCAR, the correlation is that there's only a certain amount of points you can get outside of place differential. If you're focusing on somebody leading a lap, he can only lead however many laps that race is. Even if it gets extended through a green, white checkered at the end, there's only that amount of laps leadable. There's only that amount of laps that you can beat the fastest lap of, since only one driver gets each of those. And so the correlation comes from, if you're thinking of the drivers who can lead in this race, that means they're going to hurt. Like if I won't use the 500, but let's say if we go to, like, say, Las Vegas,
Right. Okay.
and you have Elliott, Logano, Harvick, and Truex up in the front to start the race. We would assume that at max 2 of those guys would end up leading laps in this race, because nobody can lead every lap. Or no, let me change that. They all can't.
Right. I got you.
Just, you know what I mean. And so you have to circle in on who those drivers are that's projected to lead laps. That's why the term dominator is so persistent in DFS NASCAR, because people need to see people want to pick who's going to lead those races, who's going to be up front during those races. Because if they're up front, that means the other high price guys that start up front are not going to hit value. They're not going to be in the optimal lineup. And then the rest of the correlation in your lineup comes from, well, if I need to pay up for these guys who are going to lead laps, I need to pay down for other people. And so who do I pay down for? The people who offer the safest floor with the highest ceiling. So through a place differential, if somebody's mispriced or someone's starting in the back too much, like that's where you would go from.
So do you kind of just try to tell a story with respect to, if you're building one lineup, for example, with respect to like how like a race is going to go? In other words, like you say, okay, you got 2 guys in the front, you got to go 1 and a 2, and you'd like to think that one of them is going to start by leading laps, right? And then do you like kind of try to tell a story like, oh shit, my thesis of this is this good car is going to lead this good car is going to sit in the back and pass people and things like that? Or is it more just, I don't know, I'll throw my projections out there, run it through an optimizer, make sure I have 2 or 3, I'll throw it out to you, 2 or 3 hogs in the front, as opposed to 2 or 3 place differential guys? Or I don't know, do you ever think about it like that?
I guess the best example would be NFL Showdown.
Okay.
I think most of the industry understands that your lineup, whether it's optimal or not, you need to make a lineup that tells a story of Team A either leading by a lot and having the running backs, run out the clock, and Team B having to catch up, or so on and so forth. Continuing on with an NFL Showdown, I would say a NASCAR lineup needs to do the same thing, almost more exact, because since there's so many drivers and so many possibilities, if you build a lineup aiming towards certain guys leading, I mean, those guys need to lead or that lineup is not going to cash.
Yeah, like if you had some of the races where you had the high priced top guy on the pole, yeah, that's great. But if he does not, you know what I mean? Like if he doesn't lead every lap, he's got not every lap, but he's got no place differential upside, and he's got no price upside if he's really, like you said, if he's really expensive too. Here's one thing, Bobby, you didn't know this about me. So, a lot of people know, for the most part, where I came from. A lot of people know that the term sheets originally came from thoroughbred racing, when I bet on thoroughbred racing. But I got my original gambling start actually betting on harness racing, like way back in the day. And the reason I bring it up is because, when I first started looking at NASCAR, that's what I thought about, because there were 2 types of tracks, well, 3 really, but in harness racing, there was the half-mile track where horse would have to go around twice, and then there was the big mile track where they'd have to go around once. And the way you'd have to handicap both tracks is totally different, right? If you had to, if you had to bet on a horse that was going to be ridden a half-mile track, honestly, like if he didn't have like one of the first two post positions or be able to get to the front, he literally would almost have like no chance, right? And so you'd have to like kind of like tell the story about how the race is going to go. Like, okay, the 5's going to get to the front, 2 will sit the pocket. These guys are going to come in the flow, and this guy might tip wide and get whatever. Whereas in the Meadowlands, big 1 mile track, it wasn't as important. You can kind of hang out in the back. There's a lot of, you know, as they term, shit that could happen along the long straightaway and down the long straightaway. So it's just a little different. And what's cool about, in a way, about NASCAR is that the different types of tracks that you can that are available, from the half mile to the mile to the 2.5 to the road course, whatever it is. It does provide like different stories that you could tell. But it brings me to my other question, which I did ask Rick with golf too. Every week that you have a new track, you guys, all the content providers, talk about how this guy is good on this track, right? Or this type of track, like Harvick on this track, this guy on this track. Is it because the car is better on that track, or does the driver himself have a particular skill that enables him to drive on that type of track, or a combination of both?
It would be the latter. I'll bring it back to horse racing as an example. So if you look at how certain horses do, obviously some run better on turf or in the wet versus you know, the dry sand or a sloppy track. And going back to lineups as another track or as another horse example, and even like a Ben example, I think DFS NASCAR is one of the most difficult sports to get the optimal lineup in, because it's almost like a 6-player parlay of I need this guy to do this guy to do this guy to do this. It's almost like an exacta at a horse race. You know, obviously you only have like 16 horses, but you need to hit, this horse is going to finish first, second, third, fourth. It's the same thing here. And going back to your question of why certain drivers do better at certain tracks, each driver, I mean, each person, I assume you drive your vehicle differently than mine. Whether it's the same vehicle, I might be heavier on the gas, or I might turn in sharper than you do. It's the same thing with racing. Some guys just have a knack for fast sweeping tracks. Others have a knack of driving, road courses. It's the same thing. Some people can't parallel park to save their life.
That's amazing.
And some people can do it without even trying. Some people can tow trailers without even trying. Other people can't, drive a standard. And so it depends on who you are as a person. And that translates directly into how you drive a car.
That's amazing. And it's kind of the same answer Rick gave with regard to golf. It wasn't so much like course history, but more like course fit. Like for example, it's not so much that Kevin Harvick is good at, I'm gonna mess this up, at Atlanta, but he's good at that type of track, right? Okay, so it's not like there's something particularly good about the garage there, that he gets better equipment at the like that's how my conspiracy stuff is working now, about the different funding and stuff like that. All right, great. So let me okay, so I'm gonna keep playing NASCAR, and other people are gonna want to play NASCAR, and they're gonna hopefully sign up for your Patreon or whatever. And I guess like most Patreons, you have different levels of payment or whatever it is. But let's say that somebody would subscribe to your thing or whatever, and I want to play. I want to play DFS. So what how would I do that? Like, should I just watch your videos like the day before? Should I look at the projections? I mean, how would you recommend someone use? I mean, if they're going to pay 18 a month, whatever it is, how would you recommend that they use what you're giving?
So I have that priced maybe kind of with my ego behind it, but I don't offer
no way.
Listen,
do not apologize for that. Okay, I think depends on how much the person plays, but for me at $18 a month, considering that if I didn't do it, I'd be like hopelessly negative EV, whatever. For me, it's a steal. I mean, so
that's how I look at it.
Well, and I feel as though
that's the way it should be looked at. That's the truth.
What's that, Bobby?
That's the way it should be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, and I know what stuff costs, and I know what people are making off of whatever, and you should never have, at least to me, have to apologize for 18 freaking a month for being in my opinion, one of the leading experts at a sport that nobody knows shit about. Okay, so you don't have to apologize for that. That's for openers. But so let's say, and I knew Bobby would chime in on that one. Okay, because I mean, you know, if everybody else knew how hard everybody works, I mean, I work like 1/80th as hard as anybody in DFS. I have other jobs and stuff like that, and I still work hard. And so if they knew how hard you work, I mean, the 18 a month is freaking retardedly, to use a bad term nowadays, cheap. So let's just get over that. Let's just say that whatever you're charging, people are looking at how would they actually make use of the content?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I offer my actual projections that I make lineups with. That's what I'm charging for all three series. And like, for example, this is for the Clash.
You should probably, by the way, you should probably get your buddy to help you with this. You should probably get it in Excel format, because what people are going to want to do, I know I would want to do this. I'd probably want to download this and upload this to an optimizer somewhere. So it's a little hard.
Depending, it's because I do everything through Google Sheets, and so I can just copy that and get it in.
I can do that through.
Yeah. You can, if you use Excel or Google Sheets, you can just copy.
Oh, you can. I didn't know that. Okay, good.
Yeah. So that's why I did that. But you know, you're paying for my projections, and then you know I have my favorite plays for like pivots and stuff. And going back to my videos, in the beginning I say, hey, like I'm not here for beginners. I'm here to talk about GPPs. I'm here to talk about contrarian plays. I'm here to talk about things that can differentiate your lineup compared to other things. And so that's mainly what I focus on. And so you're paying for, you know, my projections. You can see where I'm leaning towards places. I don't necessarily make an all-around projection that I see a lot for even like NFL or stuff, where, you know, you have Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, let's say Allen Robinson separated in projected DFS points by like 0.7 or something like that. I make hard stances on drivers, and
well, that's what I was going to ask you too, is your projection, are they medians, or are they just like kind of like you know what, this is what I think he's going to do today? And I kind of respect that a little bit more than just giving a median.
I wanted to be, with how I do my videos, I wanted to be the guy that I never saw. I hate it when I look at content creators and they're like, well, this guy could do this or he could do that. I'm like, just take a stand. I need to know where you're at. I'm watching you for that. I can understand that, oh, he might have, you know, a projected 7 catches or 7 receptions in this, but I want to know what you think. And so that's almost an issue that you see with guys like the big MME players. When you ask them a question based on a player, they're like, well, you know, I have some percentage of him in my lineups. Does that mean he's a good player? You just playing him? You know, they're kind of, it's kind of an
that's Bobby. Response. One of Bobby's like pet peeves. The people.
Yeah,
oh yeah, I like him. I like him. I like him. I like him. I got.
I don't like that. Doesn't do anything.
So I'll say again, like his videos. I mean, if you really want, you know, watch one of his free ones, whatever. But you know, Brandon, right from the beginning, I didn't embarrass you. I was going to have you give your disclaimer that you always give before your before a YouTube thing, which is almost becoming a tagline or whatever. But he does always mention at the beginning that this is for GPP players. And whatever it is, and you have your little you know, your Gamblers Anonymous thing at the end or whatever it is. But don't blame me if you lose all your money, right? But it does gear to GPP, and I'll tell you, when he does his videos, he even says, okay, obviously this is a good play, but you know, everybody's going to know that, so why are we doing it? You know, I feel as though, and again, I hate to spoil it for people who are going to get it for free. I mean, I really, and again, this is my pet peeve. I think that every one of these videos and one of the reasons I was one of your first people that signed up to pay. I feel as I feel like I ripped you off for like a full year by seeing all this for free. You know what I mean? Because it really is. I mean, I encourage anybody to go through. I mean, I'm serious. I would have a list of the dudes that he was saying. He's like, I don't like this guy. I don't like this guy. I don't like this guy. And it wasn't like well, this guy could be whatever, and maybe you grab a 7% of him, and boy, I could see how he's got a shot. He's like,
Mhm.
I just don't want it. You know what I mean? You don't need to hear the
Yeah.
45-minute dissertation about why he might be a good play, but I don't want it. But today, I just don't want it. I just there are other guys I
Mhm.
want to play, and there's other guys that are lower owned. So from it, I look and as much as I rag on other content providers, Bobby, I mean, I wouldn't kid anybody. I mean, like one thing you get, again, Brandon himself, he'll say maybe he's not. Who knows who the best is? The best is all very have an opinion, but he's always really honest, and he's always just kind of and he's, I really do recommend his stuff. But while I'm here, tell me about you do reference some, because I have to throw them out there because you reference one.
Mhm.
You do reference this other site, this Race to the Prize. This guy Pierce, is he
Yeah.
a
So
friend of yours, or is he just a
yeah.
guy that you
So
respect or whatever?
Pierce Dietrich is a guy that I have a lot of respect for, and he's helped me out a lot. He's almost more like a mentor than anything.
I kind of gathered
He
that.
Yeah, he's it, and you'll see that we're gonna start doing live streams this year. But he's actually the guy who, oh, you might want to pause that so it's not.
Yeah, I just
Oh,
did.
okay.
Sorry.
He writes the DraftKings articles on DK Nation
Oh, okay.
for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series. He also has his own website, racefortheprize.com. That's where I get all my data from, because it's a free site. If you click on it, if you want to go to it,
I will, because I actually paid for that for like, I think I paid like 50 cents. I paid something stupid for like at the end of last year or something. I race. Is it for the number 4?
yeah, number 4, theprize.com.
Yeah, I paid for like $1, something like that.
Yeah.
Something stupid.
And so if you click spreadsheets, I'll show you an example of one, and he's going to have, if click Cup spreadsheets.
Cup. That's boring. Let's
Okay, we'll do Xfinity. And so if you click Daytona, this, and obviously he'll update this throughout the,
Okay.
when we get closer to the race, but this has everything that I use to make my research way easier. You see that he is X practice lap data, recent finishes. If when we go to 1.5 miles, he'll have the lap data from last year from NASCAR, that for whatever reason NASCAR makes it a pain in the ass to get all this stuff. Pierce does all the hard work, and he went free this year, but he has this for every single race for all 3 series. And so I'm like, I don't need to make a sheet. There's no reason for this. The market has already been filled for this.
That's what I want. That's what I want. What I want is for you or somebody to make to make sense of all this stuff. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
staring at this. Great job, but I have no idea what any of this means. So what I would probably do is say, okay, who's the highest ranked guy of all this crap? So that would do me, I would say do me no good. But this is obviously really great raw data, which you could upload into wherever. But like it's cool, like you said, like this is the stuff that you use to filter down into all that. Well, these are probably the low owned guys that I might be interested in.
Yeah, and it seems like a huge task to go through once you, and he has videos walking you through it on his own YouTube channel. Yeah, and he talks you through it. And I mean, we'll be live throughout the season.
You're going to be doing more of that. You're going to be doing more of the live stuff.
Yeah, so we're actually doing a live session later today before the Clash. We're going to do one before the duels. We're going to.
What are the duels?
So the dual races are what sets up the starting positions for the 500.
Okay.
And since NASCAR only takes 40 drivers to start the 500 right now, we should have around 44, 45, 46 drivers trying to race their way in to the 500. And so they'll actually battle each other within these races to make the field for Sunday.
And the people that get in, do they necessarily go to the back of the field or not really?
So the duels actually set up the starting positions for the 500. So the first race on Thursday would start the inside lane. So you'll have this race decide who starts first, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, 11th. And then the second race determines who starts second, fourth, sixth, eighth, so on and so forth for Sunday's race.
So now let's take like 5-10 minutes and talk about the Daytona 500, what people are interested in it. Because this is like, this is the event that probably probably a lot of the casuals play. And it's interesting because it's literally the least like any other NASCAR race during the whole season, except for maybe, what was the other one? Talladega, maybe? Or whatever. And so what people are going to hear a lot of, and I'll let you take it away, is that in this particular race, I'm going to make it a little more complicated. is that it's set up a little differently. Well, not set up differently, because the way the cars are created for this race, and because also of the way the track is set up, it's very easy for cars to get kind of bunched together. So when cars can all get bunched together in a big line, it sets up the possibility of a lot of nonsense and a lot of wrecks. And when the possibility shows up for a lot of wrecks, there's one particular type of play that you really want. And those are the ones that are going to be survivors, that are going to take advantage of that place differential thing. And as of now, there's no whatchamacallit,
yeah, we don't know who's starting.
There's no draw yet, so it's kind of silly to talk about it. But why don't you talk about, like, in general? Because this is the way I thought about it. Because I learned that the first time I looked at the video. Dude, with Daytona 500, you got to play guys in the back, and it made perfect sense to me. I'm a math guy. I know how it goes. And then my first concept was, okay, this is me being an idiot. Okay, so everybody knows that, so I'm just going to play guys in the front, right? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe that's not exactly what you want to do either, right? That's like playing like the baseball player that's just going to hit ninth and get pinch hit for in the second inning just because no one's going to play him, right? So then I started thinking, well, what maybe I'll play guys in the back, but the guys in the back, but maybe I'll play guys that maybe don't have the name recognition. So that was like my next kind of like step in being a decent DFS player, right? Like, I'll play the guys that probably are in the same position, but maybe less known than some of the other guys. And the other thing, again, this is going to be my summary, then you can go on with this, is what's going to be interesting is usually the sites, when the post positions come out, they'll price after that, and they'll account for like all the things that can happen. But for whatever reason, Daytona 500, you end up with these optimal lineups that leave like $20,000 on the table or something like that. So why don't you explain, just for fun, even though we don't have the who's going to be starting where, like how a person is going to play the Daytona 500?
So I would imagine that most people, not people necessarily known in the industry or like people who actually do research, but I would imagine if I'm a guy who signed up for one of these sites during the Super Bowl and I just happen to like NASCAR, oh, they have a NASCAR contest. Oh, well, I watched the pre-race show on Sunday, not my live show, but like Fox's live show, and everybody on there, Mike Joy, whoever's talking, they keep talking about how Denny Hamlin's the best plate racer in the history of mankind. And
so for me, I would X him out immediately.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing.
Okay.
They talk about him so much, and he's won two of these races in a row. But and I said on the Dirty Air podcast with Jason, a couple guys I do a podcast with, that I just think he's been more lucky than anything. Sure, you need to know what you're doing to survive these races, but a certain amount of luck does come into this, and I don't see him winning another one of these races. I imagine that he's going to start up in the top 10, because we almost have to approach this in a different sense of how the racers approach it. Denny Hamlin wants to race. He wants to be up front the entire. He doesn't give a shit about us. He doesn't care about anybody who has money on him other than his sponsors. Whereas we're like, we don't want you up front. We don't want you racing up there. We don't want you wrecking for the lead. And so say someone like Hamlin is someone that he's going to do well in the race. I don't like him for fantasy aspects, because I think that he's going to be up in the front for that race a big majority, and that puts him at a big risk of being involved in a wreck. In terms of the lineups that leave a lot of salary on the table, that happens because those teams are, they're underfunded, so they aren't running up with these faster cars, these big guys trying to get on TV. They're starting, in the back half of the field. They don't want to tear their car up before they need to, and so they technically survive the race longer than the guys who are racing, because they're technically not racing, they're just there to survive. And so if the guys in the back, for example, let's say like a David Reagan, well, maybe not him, if you scroll farther down, some of the like Quinn Hoff, Cody Ware, Garrett Smithley, these are not attractive names at all. And in most of the season, they're people that you could almost laugh at of how slow they're at. But in these races, that's how bad they are is almost a good thing. They're not going to be up there racing. They're not going to be up there wrecking. And so they can actually finish way better than someone like a Denny Hamlin. If Denny Hamlin gets wrecked and Quinn Hoff doesn't get wrecked in the race, I mean, by definition, Quinn Hoff had a better race than Denny Hamlin. Now, if you attach fantasy points to that aspect. If Hamlin starts in the front and wrecks and finishes 37th, if Quinn Hoff starts 36th and finishes 32nd, even, I mean, I know they're both finishing in the back half of the field, but that would give Quinn Hoff more fantasy points than Denny Hamlin. And so you have to play that game with how you make your lineups. And like I said, I tend to make stands. My stands at plate races is that I expect carnage. I'm going to play in the hand of crashes happen. People are going to be taken out in a wreck. That may or may not happen. If it doesn't happen, I'm going to get burned because my lineups are going to be made expecting crashes to happen. Usually between the 4 plate race weekends, the 2 Daytona races and the 2 Talladega races, usually one of these weekends is really clean and the strategy doesn't work. I just embrace the fact that it's going to work, the other 3 weekends throughout all the series.
Does this I guess the answer is yes. This applies for the other races too, the truck and the Infinity.
It almost applies more because those guys aren't as talented in that race, and that's not an insult. They just don't have the experience. And so if anything, those guys, if the first truck race that DraftKings offered was a Daytona race, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I think there was 8 or 9 drivers out of the 36 who finished on the lead lap. And so pretty much the entire field wrecked out. And so if you played guys from the back, they by default ended up with more fantasy points than the other plays.
Here's like a dumb question. So I don't want to get too much into like 2, 4, 4, 3 and 2, 4, whatever. Well, like you can't play like all 6 guys at 5K, right? I mean, from the back, can you, or can you?
If you want a high scoring lineup, you can. That's usually not the optimal play. So I don't, and I explained this. I'm pretty sure I did in the video. I don't aim for the optimal lineup. I just aim for a high scoring lineup. And if I dumb luck my way into the optimal lineup, that's just what happens.
Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to wrap it up, but you've been just awesome. Just do me a favor, just for fun. Give me one guy that we already you gave me one. So you gave me Hamlin, who's going to be popular that we don't like. Give me one guy. This is for the Daytona 500. I really almost rather you guys that are listening to me don't even play this race. You know what I mean? Only because because that's just not the way NASCAR usually works. But I mean, if you want to play NASCAR, I mean, like I love the Xfinity, the trucks, like the minor leagues, and the regular tracks or whatever it is. I'm sure this is like the big one everybody wants to play. But I really get into it. I'm going to continue to try to improve and get better and watch this stuff. But I mean, look, at its action. It's a tremendous sweat, man. It's a couple hours, and it's not like football. Nobody can really put kneel on the ball. You never just when and this happened a zillion times, and the sweat is like so brutal because first of all you're winning, and you think you're winning, and then God forbid there's like not a yellow, but let's say that at the end of the stage, the way the scoring works, they like keep track of these cars as they're kind of shuffling through the garage, and you like lose all your money without even anything happening. Right? And so I really think it's a tremendous sweat. It's totally cruel and unusual punishment when you're ahead and you get wrecked, but you're always it seems like you're always in it. So I really recommend as a sweat sport to do it. But I'll ask once more. So give me one guy that maybe is going to be lower owned that you would play. So
right now going into Daytona, obviously it depends on where they start.
Right.
I plan on being overweight on BJ McLeod.
Okay.
In this race. Is he even on there?
He might not even be on. We got to wait a little
bit. People like, oh no, he is. He's 4,800.
Okay.
I plan on being overweight on him. People like Quinn Hoff, Cody Ware, Garrett Smith. I mean, I know you asked for one, but these are the types of drivers that I plan on being just overweight on the field in. And regardless of how many lineups I make for the 500, which right now I'm aiming for like 30 to 40 to 50, somewhere around there. Okay. I mean, I'm going to make different combinations with these guys in and out. And these are just the guys I just love to make lineups around.
Awesome. Hey, listen, Brandon, you keep doing what you're doing. Again, I encourage everybody to support him, and forget support him. He's not a freaking charity. You support yourself by seriously support yourself by paying for your shit, and you keep up the good work, Brandon.
Well, thank you for having me on, Eric. I really do appreciate it.
Bobby, you hang in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was really, really helpful. I mean, it's stuff that I know almost nothing about. It's like the one DFS, this and MMA, I just know nothing about, but that was really, really helpful.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Thank you guys.
All right, dude. Give me where can they find you on Twitter, all that stuff? Or
Yeah, Brandon Cruz DFS on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. It's all the same.
all right, sounds good, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
I'll see you later, Bobby.
See you guys.